Hello everyone. This talk that's about to happen is from 0xCode, also known as Kelvin, who's from Holland, and he's going to show us about Elementum, which is his already released game. And Dave's sent me, I think you can see that without too much shine on it there. There's a poster for it, I think you can all see that. And there's the discs pack. He's going to show us this and an up-and-coming game that he's working on, which is Electrobots, both of which looks really good. I don't know if anybody's played Elementum, but it's a brilliant 50 frames a second game on both the BBC Master and Electron. Yeah, so I think he's going to go into some details about how he's written those games. So far away, Kelvin.
Yes, thank you, Dominic. As you mentioned, I'm usually known as 0xCode, both on Twitter and on Stardot. And I think I joined maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago. And the whole nostalgia thing hit off with the childhood Acorn Electron. And yeah, it just blew my mind what people had done, like Tony Ogden, who spoke before, in the 80s, and I was curious, what can I do with the Acorn Electron that I couldn't do as a child myself? And so 30 to 40 years later, I challenged myself and I started with some demos and then moved on. When I ran out of ideas for demos, I moved on to, okay, how about writing a game? So I started writing a game, and I'll be talking about game development for Elementum and Electrobots. Specifically for the Acorn Electron, but I created them to work on the BBC Micro and the BBC Master as well. So it's going to be a talk about all the Acorn machines, except for the Atom, of course. I'm going to share my screen. Hang on. Here we go. This is my presentation, but first I want to show you something else. I just minimize everything. So this is I just saw this yesterday. This is a really cool graffiti-like background, and a shout out to Pixel Blip, who created this background for Elementum. And instead of making a free ad for my laptop producer, I created this background for my talk today. So thank you, Pixel Blip. And I'll be starting my presentation now. Make it full screen. Here we go. So this is what I'm going to be talking about. And first, a little bit more about me. I'll keep it short for you. From the Netherlands, like Dominic said, started on Twitter. You will know me as 0xCode or 0xCode6502. I'm usually a bit more active on Twitter. So if you want to follow my stuff, my development, you can find me on Twitter. And that's really cool. And like I said, I started with my childhood Acorn Electron. I still have it. It still works, of course. But since then, I've acquired a few more. So I've got a whole cloud of electrons. This is an old Twitter post where I have 4 electrons, but currently I own, I think I lost count. I have 7 electrons with all kinds of additions. I have 2 masters. I have the BBC Micro. I have Commodores and Spectrums, whatever. But the main machine that's always on my desk is my childhood Electron, with a few cool additions like SD card or a disk drive, etc. And something about my backgrounds. I'm not a game developer. I don't even work in IT in my daily life. But I do have, a long time ago, I studied computer science at the university, which is where I think all the basic stuff comes from, and the interest in computers, and it's still to today. And like I said, I moved from creating some demos, like I started maybe 2 years ago. I was inspired by stuff from bit shifters and other platforms, and thinking, okay, that's cool, but it's all for other machines. What can I do on the Electron? So you will see that's something like a reoccurring thing. Everything I do is to try to put the electron in the spotlight. What can it do? And it can usually do more than most people think. So that's what's driving me. And then I moved on to some games. And if you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw that already. But I'm going to be more in detail about it. So why? Why do I do game development? And this is I still remember from my childhood, the Acorn Electron Advanced User Guide. I was reading through that. I tried to understand the electron beyond BBC Basic. I was looking at all the machine code instructions, and basically my 12 or 13-year-old self couldn't quite understand and grasp the whole concept. So I didn't get much further with that, but I still, in the back of my mind, what can I do on the 6502? And of course, the reason, if you ask me why, because I can. And I don't care if I'm 35 or 40 years late to the party, it's still fun to do. So that's the main reason. And it usually starts with a technical challenge. Like I said, how can I make the electron sing? It's easy to do on the beep usually, but how about the electron? So that's the technical challenge for me. I like rooting for the underdog. The electron is usually seen as a lesser version of the beep, and they're probably right, but it doesn't bother me. And I really like the, how do you call it, the battle or the dance of cycles and bytes. Just a limited amount of space, limited amount of speed, especially on the electron. And I'm still interested, how can I make this thing do stuff that you wouldn't expect? So, and of course, assembly, that's my language of choice. 6502 is ASM. It's just a fascinating puzzle. How can I make things faster, shorter, easier? It's just fun. It's like a puzzle to me. And like I said, as a kid, I wanted to, but I couldn't. And now I'm more grown up, a little bit more grown up, and I can. So that's the main reason. And of course, it's nerdy. I mean, it's fun to do. So that's why I do it. And if you look more into the how of game development, especially on the electron, it's not something that came from somebody else. It's my own guidelines. These are the things I try to do. That is, the electron, I cannot stress this enough, is going to be the lead development platform. So everything I do has to work on the electron. And if it works on something else, cool, but the electron is leading for me. But I decided, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to go the extra mile with my games, and I will make sure that the stuff I make, the binary, will work on the BBC Micro and on BBC Master as well. And as it turns out, it's maybe not easy, but it's quite doable. And I'm thinking, if I can make a game like ELEMENTUM and ElectroBots to be identical on the electron and the beep, maybe I will inspire some other people to keep the electron in mind while making BBC games. And one of the few other guidelines is I want it to be possible to use my software on a really standard machine. So no extra memory, no other additional hardware. And it has to be, if you want to be old school, you can load it in from tape. You can, of course, load it from disk or from a more modern SD card solution, but it should work on a really standard machine. And you should see no difference. It shouldn't go faster. It shouldn't go better on a BBC Micro. It should be identical. That's my goal here. And I'm always really annoyed at games. I think it's lazy coding. If there's sprite flicker, I don't want to have sprite flicker, and I want to have smooth animation. So that's a technical challenge for me. How can I keep the player at least, maybe not the whole game, but the player at least at 50 frames per second? That's a challenge. And I want to be using bare metal, so no operating system, no basic, no, everything goes out. I use the whole machine. And of course, if you want to make a game, it has to be challenging and fun. And that's what Tony Oakton was talking about, maybe the most important thing and really difficult to achieve. So how about some tools? I'm not going to go through all of them. I will show a few more later. But this is you've heard I mentioned before. This is some of the toolkit I use, like emulators, real hardware to test, of course, and many, many, many tools to develop. As you can see, or maybe now you cannot see, but I'm not actually, maybe that's a bit of shame, but I'm not actually developing on the machine itself, like some of the legends from the 80s. They didn't have a choice actually, but I'm using modern tools because it makes development so much more fun and easier to do. And I think two of the main, of maybe, now it's not a coincidence, the BeepAsm is first because I'm a big fan of BeepAsm. It's really cool. If you don't use it, I'm not sure who doesn't, but it's really cool. And everything else supports is like a good editor, a tile editor to make worlds, a sprite editor, some graphic tools, everything supports that. But BeepAsm to me is the core of my development. If I didn't have BeepAsm, I would be lost, I think. So how about the what of game dev? Because when I'm talking about theoretical things here, what are we talking about? We're talking about Elementum. So the game is already released. This is what it looks like. I'll show you a demo soon. And this is Electrobots. This is how I started, I don't know, a few months ago. Actually, the idea for the cute little robot started maybe 1 year ago. I made some mock-up game. And it evolved into, okay, I want to make something that is more colorful. I want to use mode 5. I want to use a big open world. And that's how Electrobots came about. And it's basically almost finished at this moment. And a little bit more about Elementum. It's basically, if I look back in my own childhood, my history, like I said, I'm not a game developer for real life. I think that's maybe the part I'm most proud of, that I actually finished something that I started making, because demo effects are really cool, but they're short and sweet and easy. Making a game that is both challenging and finished from start to the end, that's really difficult. So I'm most proud of that, having it finished. And I'm also proud of having Retro Power, that's Acadian, making my 80s dream complete. And having actually, look at all these beauties, having a physical copy of my game, my first ever game, Elementum, on different disc formats. And even an advertisement, you can order it. It's almost like we're back in the 80s, so that's really cool. And this is more of the stacks of discs, and that's really cool. Of course, I can talk about it, but I can show you Elementum. Hang on. And I will show you that it will be identical on the Electron and the BBC. So this is my own emulator, which I use. Do the sound a little bit. It should be okay. Make it full screen. I'll switch off the annoying music. Sorry about that. So this is the start screen. This is what you get if you download or buy the game. And basically, it's like it's a platform game, and you have 32 levels and increasing difficulty. And the second set of 16 levels is even more difficult. This is the attract mode. It jumps to attract mode. But I'm going to play to show you. And I'll turn back on the sound if it's not too annoying. Okay, there we go. So this is you are the player. That's an Electron. So again, everything is Electron in my world. So this is, you're moving around and you're collecting actually 8 status bits. So it's the theme is computers, CPUs, transistors, electrons, and you're collecting status bits. So the sign flag, overflow flag, all inside the 6502 CPU. And if you manage to get 8 flags, I'm still okay with it. You can do turbo like this, and you can do more normal movement. It's still 50 frames per second. I have to make a really long. See, I can. This is why people hate me. So you collect the 6502 CPU. That's the end of level 1. And of course, you can understand. I have a password system, so you can start from the level you left off if you get killed. And believe me, it's quite easy to get killed. So we move on to level 2. And it won't be until level 3 or 4 that you get some additional enemies. This is a difficult one. There we go. And once again, we collect the CPU. So I'm not going to show all, I cannot even make it probably. So quit here. Quit. You can also change the mode from normal to hard, because in normal mode you have an infinite number of lives and you can try as many times as you want. In hard mode you get, I think, if you start at level 1, you get 41 lives. That sounds like a lot, but believe me, it's going to be hard to get it to the end to level 32. So this is Elementum. I'm going to shut it down and show you quickly the BBC version. And it should be absolutely identical. Hopefully it's smooth on screen. There we go. This is the exact same binary, multi-platform binary, and I just play the game at the same speed. Sound is off. Yeah. Same sound, same speed, same movement, everything is the same. So it doesn't matter on which machine you play this. Here we go. I'm getting better. Okay, kill it. So this is, I'm quite happy, I'm quite pleased with the result. And I want to show you also Electrobots. Is the game I'm currently working on. Nearly finished, famous last words, because it's always like the last details, of course. But I'm really struggling with memory, and there's not much things I can add. So I'm going to have to call it nearly finished because of that. This is some impressions, some screenshots. You have basically 3 different zones in the game to make it more interesting, and 3 different movement types. So you have the red, green one is the land zone with the red robots. You have the water zone with the magenta robots, and the space zone with the yellow robot. And of course we can talk about it, but I can. It's better to show you. First, the Electron version. This is basically loading it from virtual tape. Let's sped up a little bit. Just to show you, it's loading a tape image. It could be disk image, could be tape, it doesn't matter. I'll make it full screen. So this is the start screen. I even managed, I could leave it out and put it in a loader in front, but actually I put the redefine keys in here. So you can redefine the keys in the game. With, oh, sorry, that's a stupid combination. Hang on. This is actually the stuff I'm going to use to. Redefine keys. If you wait long enough, you'll get a track mode, like shows different rooms of the world. It's basically, it's different from Elementum. It's a whole open world game. I've got 128 rooms at the moment, and there's not going to be any more because I have to rethink my compression scheme here. This is a track mode, so it's showing you different rooms. But I will start the game just to show you. This is basically first reveal, I haven't shown the game to many people yet, so you will probably recognize that sound. This is the land zone. This is the Electron version, by the way. And the only difference you will notice is the delay between switching rooms, because there's so much going on in the background, data decompression, etc. It's a little bit slower on the Electron, but still acceptable, I think. So if you move between rooms, the movement of this robot is 50 frames per second and really smooth. You can jump, move around. There's not much going on because the difficulty has to ramp up slowly. So there's no enemies at this stage yet. But you can collect these coins to get 100 points. You can move through these, how do you call it, tubes. It's all inspired, of course, Chucky Egg, Citadel, whatever. It's all part of the inspiration. These are 2 enemies. And this is quite a difficult jump. I'm a fan of difficult jumps. Here we go. More enemies. The enemies are not moving at 50 frames per second, but I can dynamically change them in my design to move up to 50 frames per second or slower than that. And still, as you can see, hopefully there's no sprite flicker, one of the guidelines I try to follow. We have platforms. They can move at different speeds. I'm still tweaking and tuning the speeds of enemies and platforms. I have keys and locks in the game. And I'm a big fan of what Tony Ogden said. You have to have certain teasers of things that you can get, but still you cannot get it right now. And I will show you if I switch to the, you can switch 3 zones anytime you want. So I switch to the water zone now. That's the other robot. Here we go. This is the water zone. And the movement is completely different because you will move, it's more slowly. It's at, what is it, 16.7 frames per second. And you can do double jumps or even triple jumps. It's like you're moving in water. I've got some bubbles going on here to enhance the illusion. You've got other colors, other stuff going on, and a seemingly unreachable diamond that's worth 1,000 points. So of course you want to get it, yeah? But this is a completely different motion. You can move up as much as you want, just like this. It's more slowly. It's yeah, different kind of movement, different backgrounds. Still some coins that you can collect, and still not too many enemies in the first few rooms, of course. I switched to space zone, and this is where you get lost in space. So this is movement. 0G with inertia, of course. And this is me moving around with the keyboard, no joystick, unfortunately. So this is, you have to be careful because there's a lot of spikes and a lot of enemies. And the enemies are even shooting at you, if I can show that. There we go. First they were shooting through the wall, now the wall stops the bullets. I thought it was a little bit more fair. But here we go. So you can, this is different movement, but you have to be careful like this. How do you pick up the coin without getting hurt? Well, try it for yourself. So this is a few more rooms. No obvious entry except for the locked door in the beginning. And here will be some more enemies, I think. Yeah. See, so even if you have 1 player and 4 enemies in this case, it will be smooth, flicker-free animation. And that's what I really want to achieve. Okay, so let's kill the Electron version and briefly show the BBC version, which of course will be completely identical. There we go. Start. Let's go to the, what's with all the weird stuff? Yeah, I don't know. So this is space, like we saw before. I will try to show you a different area over here. Oh, this is like a teaser also, like with a lock and, whoa, what's this object? Actually, the story is, and the story evolves from the technical challenge, I have to be honest. It starts with a technical challenge and I think, oh yeah, I have to have a cool story, backstory. So you're actually 3 robots exploring a planet, Terra Nova, and you will have to discover 8 ancient mystical objects and some other things like coin and diamonds and stuff. And you cannot leave the planet unless you have all 8 objects. So that will be the backstory. Oh, actually, that's, oh yeah, I will show you the different zones like this. It just moves completely identically, I think. I hope you will agree. The land zone, same. This is the BBC version. And if I quit the game, I've got the backstory on the main screen in really short form. Okay, so that's a beep version. And actually, there's a demo going around that you can play with a few rooms. They look different, I think, but you get an impression of the game. Okay, moving on, looking at the time here. So Electrobots. Let's talk about some more technical stuff. So I'm going to be talking about the multi-platform binary flicker-free sprite animation, how to maximize RAM, data decompression, optimization, and some tools. So it's still a lot to cover here. And a friendly reminder, if you have any questions or remarks for me, please put them in the chat to Dominic Beasley. Thank you. So here we go, a multi-platform binary. like I said, I want my game to work on the electron first and second on the beep. So how do we do that? It's very easy to detect, okay, which host am I running on? It's OS byte call. And actually, I think maybe 95% of my code is identical on Electron and BBC. What are the differences? These are the differences. I'm sure there are more, but these are some of the main differences. And actually, the interrupt handler, I've set up the screen that I want to have an interrupt at scanline 100, and I want to have an interrupt at scanline 256. And of course, the Electron doesn't have a hardware timer. It has two interrupts, RTC and display end, which happen to be at the 100 scanline and the 256 scanline. And I just programmed the hardware timer on the BBC to have an interrupt at exactly these points. So I can have the same code for the Electron and BBC by having the interrupts at the same parts. And I'll explain later why I need these two interrupts. So how about key scanning? You don't want to be using, and I cannot even use the operating system. You want to do hardware key scanning, sorry. So that's basically just a different register you have to read on the Electron and the BBC. And you can quickly get in a few instructions you can get if a key is pressed or not. So that's easy. That's not really an obstacle to code for both systems. And sound, like I said, I want the sound to be the same, so I don't use any elaborate music or elaborate sound effects on the BBC Micro, which is of course possible, multi-channel, etc. I'm using simple sounds that work on the Electron, and the registers are a bit different, of course. And actually, I think the beep is quite complex, so I have a whole function write sound chip, which uses those registers to write a value. The Electron is much simpler on that part. The color palette, different registers also, and a different way of writing to them. But basically, these four things are the main differences between those two machines. So if you, that's what I'm calling you all on you. If you want to develop for both machines, of course you have to look at speed and that kind of thing. But the memory will be the same, and these four things will be different. But it is you can solve this problem if you want. One example, if you do a call to sound on one of my functions in my source code, first of all, you check, okay, are we mute or not? And the second check is this an Electron we're running on, or is this a BBC? If you would have two binaries, you wouldn't have those checks, of course. You have an Electron binary and a BBC binary, but this is all in one binary. So I have to check at a few crucial points, what machine are we running on here? So if you're on an Electron, we do this. On a BBC, we do that. So that's quite easy. And moving on to eliminating sprite flicker at 50 frames per second, because sprite flicker is easy to avoid, but more difficult if you want to move at 50 frames per second. And the main principle is, which sounds really easy on paper, is don't draw or erase your sprites when the Electron beam, that's a bit old school, but if the Electron beam is at that part on the screen, yeah, because that's what causes the sprite flicker. And I don't want to use a back buffer. That's one of the options you could do. You could have two screen buffers, but it would take twice the memory. And I'm already having memory problems as it is, so I want to use one single screen buffer. So I have to use something else. And it helps if your sprite plotting is fast enough. So you can use pre-shifted sprite frames. You can use exclusive OR plotting, which is what I use. I did use masked sprite plotting before, but it was too slow. And you can unroll some stuff to make it a little bit faster, but it takes more space. So that's always the balance of bytes and cycles. And I have, like I said, I have two interrupts at 100 and 256. And this is what I call the upper screen half and the lower screen. And what I basically do, if I know the player is in the lower screen half, I have to draw and erase the player in the upper screen half. So you don't have this sprite flicker, or the other way around, if the player is in the other half. The same goes for the enemies. And of course, you will notice that the enemies always move strictly in the upper half or strictly in the lower half. They don't cross screen halves. They don't follow the player or whatever. They stay in their designed position. So it makes it easier at design time to determine when should I draw this enemy. And I don't have enough time on the Electron to draw and erase all enemies. I have time to draw the player, and I have time to draw and erase one enemy. That's why I do interleaved updates. Yeah? So I select an enemy that needs updating and then move on to the next in the next frame. You cannot do everything at once. So that's a trick I learned. And of course, talking about it is all fun, but let's do a live demo. And it's a demo of the system that I'm using to eliminate the sprite flicker. And I'm showing you that, of course, on my favorite system, the Acorn Electron, in my own emulator, which, by the way, shows all this kind of nerdy stuff in the background, if you wanted to. But let's kill that. So here we go, Electrobots, and it should be like a debug version if I start the game. Yeah. So we've got all these colored bars. I can still play the game as I want, but I've got these colored bars, and not all of them are interesting. But the green one at the top is the part of the time you have per frame where I'm drawing the player sprite. So the robot is drawn in the green time slot. So if I move around, it varies a little bit, slower, faster, etc. If I jump, and I should move, oh, I can. It's easy to switch to space. If I'm in space, I can show you. If I cross the boundary here, the scan line 100, it will switch to the lower half. So the sprite is in the upper half, and I'm drawing the sprite in the lower half. That's the green part. And as you can see, it takes a sizable chunk of memory time to draw and erase this little robot, and even if it's exclusive or plotting. So I don't have that much time left. And if I move down, it's the other way. The other bars, actually, those are for, I don't know, showing the statistics, doing some game logic, scanning for keys, etc. Updating bullets, updating enemies. And of course, the trick is, in the screen half that doesn't use much processing time, do all the other stuff. Yeah, so actually the movement of the sprite, the key scanning, the game logic is all done separately from drawing and erasing the sprite. Otherwise, it would take too much time in one half of the frame. I hope you understand what I mean. So this is what's going on. I should have a screen with some enemies to show you what's happening then. Shouldn't be too hard to find enemies in my game, actually. Here we go. So it's maybe difficult to see, but the green stuff is still when I update the player, and the red flashing bar is when one of the enemies, maximum of one, sometimes it's 0, it could be 1, but never more. One of the enemies is updated and erased and drawn, etc. So you can see everything that is still black background is still available time. But if there is more enemies, more stuff going on, it could fill up the whole frame. So this is one way of looking, do I still have time left for stuff to do? So that is the time constraint. And I want to show you briefly what it looks like on the beat, because that's why you could be envious of the BBC. One of the reasons is that you have so much time left. It's amazing. If you go, see, you cannot even see the screen, the green bar, because it's hidden in VSync in the non-display part of the screen. So yeah, if I go to space again, if I switch up, see, this is the green part on the beat. It's much smaller than the Electron. There's so much time left to do other things. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to work on the Electron, so that's my main constraint. I hope this explains a little bit about removing sprite flicker. Going to maximizing memory. Yeah, that's always a problem if you want to have a cool game with lots of graphics, a lot of stuff going on a large open world like Electrobots, and even Elementum. I have to be careful with memory. How can you maximize RAM? well, first of all, don't use any of the ROMs, yeah, like the operating system, BASIC, the disk filing system, whatever, kick it out, yeah. And then try to use all of the available 5800 hexadecimal bytes in mode 4 and 5. Elementum is mode 4, Electrobots mode 5. I have the same amount of screen memory, 10 kilobytes, which leaves us about 22 kilobytes for everything, the levels, the game, the sounds, graphics, yeah. And you can use most of that if you're careful. These are the things that you don't want to touch, at least if you know what you're doing. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can see these are crucial memory locations that shouldn't be touched without knowing exactly what you're doing. And one of the most important is, of course, the stack. And I'm using a very small stack. And I'm sure Tricky will make some comment that it's too large, but that's okay. And of course, you have to be careful with the interrupt vector location at 204, 205. And I'm using the break intercept vector. And of course, you have to make sure there's an RTI, return from interrupt instruction at D00 to service any spurious NMI interrupts. And of course, you have a large chunk of RAM goes to screen memory. But we can use some of it if we're smart enough. So this is how I maximize RAM. I can use almost all of the 22 kilobytes. And how else can we maximize RAM? Actually, I use a lot of data compression and data decompression. And I use Exomizer, and I use the one by BitShifters, Kieran and friends. And I don't want to have separate workspace buffers in my main RAM, my main memory. So I only use screen memory as temporary workspace for decompressed data. So what stuff is actually compressed? Elementum is very minimal. I just compress the whole screen, the 16 levels times 2. It's mode 4, it's monochrome. I just compress it down, and it's enough. Yeah, it's a really low effort, lazy approach actually, but it fits and it's okay. But I knew Electrobots, 128 rooms, it's going to be difficult. So I started with a tile system, and I have 128 rooms out of a maximum of 256, which I can never reach like this. I compressed them down in chunks of 32 rooms for better compression. I've compressed all the object data, all the tile sprite data, the image that you see on the title screen, and I even have some compressed code overlay. So anything that I can compress, I have compressed, I think, except for sprites like enemies, the player, because you want to use them quickly. You don't want to decompress them before using them. So that's not compressed. Oh yeah, code overlays is something that I introduced in a very late stage in the game because I was running out of memory. I had maybe, I don't know, 16 bytes left or something, or 100 bytes, I don't know, something like that, less than one page. So I'm thinking, okay, there are some modules in the game, like the intro screen, the key redefinition screen, the final screen. They are separate entities. I could compress them down to compressed code and decompress them to screen memory, and hide them from view. So they live in the top part of the screen, they execute in the screen memory, and I hide them by blanking the color palettes at the appropriate time. And in this way, you can have more codes, and it's not part of the main game, the game proper, it's just some additional modules. They live in code overlays. And actually, I think I can show you, I can show you here in the video. This is very slow motion on purpose. It's 1 frame per second in an emulator. This is decompressing 32 rooms worth of data to the screen. Then I'm selecting, okay, which room. Oh, hang on, I'm just pausing this for one moment. Can I pause this? Yeah. I've blurred out some things that I'll talk about later. I select in the top right is the room data that I need for the current room that I just copied out of this chunk of 32 rooms. Then I decompress all the object data, which I blurred because I don't want to have any spoilers here. Then, oh shit, that's what happens if you press space. You select the you select the object that you need for this room, which is a diamond in this case. on the top left. I'm going to move that to a safe place, two lines lower. And then I'm going to decompress all the tile sets. I have 7 tiles in each set. And I draw the tiles on the screen that are in the current tile set. So that's a lot of work. But the main advantage is I can use only screen memory for decompressing any data that I have. But I have to be careful because you're also drawing on the screen. Yeah, and I cannot move. I can use the top 2 lines because that's a statistic like score and lives. And then we'll have the title image on top of that. This is the title screen, actually. And it will change the colors. And this is the final intro screen. And it's a little bit different nowadays. But this shows the principle of decompressing data to the screen while drawing the screen, basically. Okay, so moving on, if you are still looking for space and speed or both, how about some optimization in your game or demo? Of course, this is no-brainer. You want to use most of your variables. You want to put them into 0 page. Why? Because it's faster to access them, and it's faster. Or the code will be shorter to. It will be faster and shorter. That's if you don't do that, you should start doing that. I'm a big fan of tables, so pre-calculated tables. And usually my games, they start with a lot of tables for screen addresses, for any kind of calculations. But if you're running out of memory, unfortunately I had to rewrite most of my tables back to some calculations because I needed the space. And I had enough speed, but I needed the space. So I moved back most of them. But sometimes you can use a hybrid solution. If you use a shorter table and you pre-shift the index, you can use a short table and fast code, short code, to achieve what you want. I make sure that the screen layout is smart, so I don't want, you want to use as much of the screen as possible, but I want to use my coordinates for the player, for the bullets, for everything. I want to keep it as simple as possible, so I want to use 8-bit coordinates, and I cannot reprogram the screen on the Electron like I could on the BBC. So I'm not doing that. I just limit the area of the screen to 256 by 256 in Elementum and 144 white pixels by 256 in Electrobots. So I can use simple math, 8-bit coordinates, except for the bullet. The bullet stuff, that I never wrote that before, but I wrote some tests in BBC Basic. And it's actually quite difficult to have a bullet zooming in, I mean zoning in on the player, but not exactly that it will hit the player always. So I have, that's a bit complicated code, and it uses fixed width 16-bit integers. And oh yeah, this is a trick I use. You can simplify a lot of tables if you only use even coordinates, because you want to move at 50 frames per second, but you don't always necessarily want to move at 1 pixel every frame. And so if you use even coordinates, you're moving 2 pixels, and you can simplify a lot of your sprite plotting and tables. That's a trick I use in both games. And of course, standard toolkit stuff is self-modifying code for, could be speed, could be reusing code, could be anything. I use a lot of that. It's second nature almost. And if you're still desperate for space, and you have compressed all the data like I did, and your game is still fast enough, that should be priority number 1. What else can you do to get some RAM back? Well, you can share, reuse parts of your code. I have been known to share even a single return from a subroutine. Yeah, just if there's one close by, I jump to that one instead of inserting a new one. That could be some trick you use to, every byte counts, right? Tail calls, yeah, so jump to subroutine and followed by a return. Don't do that, make it a jump, or a branch, even better. Branching, jump is quite expensive. It's slow, it's long, and you can make it faster if you know, okay, the 0 flag will always be set or clear or whatever, or any other flag. I can use the appropriate branch, yeah, so it will be shorter and faster. You can even make chains of short branches if you want. There will be subtractions, additions. Do I need to clear the carry? Do I need to set the carry? Or do I know the status of the carry bit? And you can eliminate many of these instructions. Smart flags, have to be careful because it doesn't always work. But if you're toggling between 1 and 0, don't just do the obvious solution like loading 0, storing in 0 page, or loading 1, storing in 0 page. You can do it faster and better and shorter with these instructions. So just shifting the carry in and out. And of course, like I said, sometimes, unfortunately, you have to sacrifice a few cool tables and do some math if it's fast enough. And like I did, use screen memory if you can. And many Electron games use part of the screen memory. You see garbage on top or at the bottom or whatever, because they are running out of space. So they use part of the screen memory. I decided I don't want to do that in the game itself. I'm doing it in the code overlays, like I explained before. But I don't want to use it in my main game. And I have been able to avoid that so far. But you could use part of the screen memory if you really have to. And you can even hide it if you want, but it's at a price. Okay, I have a few more things to show you. And that's some of the tools I use. And this is what sets me apart from the legends from the 80s, because they have to program on the machine itself. They have to make their own sprite editors, their own level editors, whatever. That's really cool, but that sucks the fun out of game development for me. So I'm using modern tools. I'm using a sprite editor. This is from a sprite from Elementum, the main player, the Electron. And you will notice a lot of empty space around it. And that's because it moves in, or it's designed in 8 different frames that change I think 1 or 2 pixels, probably 2 pixels. So you can have really smooth movements without having all kinds of complex sprite plotting routines. So you can do sprite plotting on a byte boundary, which is much faster, and you can use you can select the frame that you want to plot there, the pre-shifted sprite frame. And this is 2 colors, normal aspect ratio, no masks because I'm using exclusive OR plotting, and like I said, multiple frames per sprite, which takes up more space, but it looks cooler, and it's easy to write. The same is, or almost the same for Electrobots. You have wide mode 5 pixels. So it's a bit of a pain to create sprites for, but I think I succeeded quite okay with that. It's wide pixels, 4 colors, so I have more colors. And I change the colors each zone, so it looks like there's even more colors going on. And the same, no masks, multiple frames. It's a lot of things that I wrote for Elementum are, of course, reused or adapted to Electrobots. And if I would write a game again, I can use maybe 80% of my code base for the new game. That's no problem. So game development could be faster because of that. And I use a tile editor, tiled, to make my levels. And with Elementum, that's on the left with the red color, I'm using it basically as a drawing tool, not really a tile system. I created some tiles and I draw the levels, 16 levels, but that's about it. It's the first time I use this tile editor, so I was still learning what can it do, what can it not do. If you look closely, you can see the positions for the bits that you have to collect. You can see the position for the CPU. You can see the starting position for the player. And it would be fun if it gets automatically translated to my source, but it isn't, because it's all done by hand. So you can clearly see this is my first attempt at using modern tools and using it moderately successful. This is the way it's built up. And this is the process. I've got the tile editor. I export the level to a picture, PNG. And I use other cool tools to export it to a binary. And then I used Exomizer data compression to make a compressed binary. So, and that times 16. And I just put everything in my binary one at a time. I mean, one after the other. And it fits. So that's a really low effort, a really lazy approach to fitting 16 levels and using this completely wrong. And I improved my use of the tile editor with Electrobots. This is part of the start in the land zone. I designed the tiles, which are 12 by, oh, it's in the information here, 12 by 24 white pixels. I designed the whole world, which is 16 by 16 rooms, and each room is 12 by 10 tiles. So it's a huge world. It reminds me of the maps that Tony Ogden showed me this morning in his talk. And that's my world will look like that, but I'm not going to show you because it will be spoilers all over. So I'm just showing this small part, but you can see you can see the basic placement of tiles and objects, but there's a lot more going on in a different layer, in an objects layer, I call it. You've got doorways, portals, triggers, enemies, locations, speed, which is a fire zone, which isn't a fire zone, all kinds of metadata. And the coolest thing is, and this is where I had to really brush up my Python skills, of course, you don't. You export the sprite data, but you don't export the whole world. You export a JSON, which is just a text file, with all the properties, all the stuff that you put in your metadata. I made a Python script that translates all of that from the tile editor to BeepAsm, my favorite tool. So it creates the source for you with all the levels and all the enemies and everything in there. And then it just goes into the normal process of assembling to a binary. And then it's all compressed, of course. All the 128 rooms are compressed down with Exomizer. And it's a more complex process. But the advantage is, if I change something in the design of the world, I reassemble my game and it's there. Yeah, and I don't have to change anything manually, or it's much more fun. And as you can see, this is basically cheating compared to the 80s. But it keeps the fun in game development for me. And I think, yeah, actually, this is the final slide where I'm showing some video of my two games, Elementum on the left, Electrobots on the right. You can find me on YouTube, you can find me on Twitter. I'll be showing much more of game developments and stuff that I do on Twitter and on Stardot, of course. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead.
Right, hi. Thanks, 0xCode, sorry, that was brilliant. I've got not many questions so far, as usual. Everybody's been very reticent, but I'm sure they'll all pile in a minute. They're coming through now. I've got the first one's from Ed Durish, who does the high score challenge. He's saying when he first started playing Elementum, he found it really difficult. He didn't like it. And like me, it's because he's old, and it's different to the usual types of Beep games. But as he's played it a lot, he's found that he's really got into it, and he really likes it a lot now. Now that he's figured out how to move around the screen, which I have to say is quite weird, how you can jump in space and stuff like that, and they're going fast and slow. But once you start getting the hang of it, it's a really, I think, yeah, like Ed, I think it's a really brilliant game. And he's saying he's looking forward to Electrobots for the next high score challenge. That was my comment.
I did follow the high score thing on Stardot, and one of the things that was hilarious was people they intended to come around my house to throw bricks of appreciation through my front window because it's so frustrating. Really, I like it.
Yeah, and then first up as well says he's really happy he got up early to watch this talk. I think he's in Canada, on the other side of Canada, so it must be very early there. All from Kieran J here. He's saying this is amazing, great work. He's got a question though. Do you have enough spare bytes to make the stars twinkle a little bit in the space zone?
Probably, yeah. That's, you know, as it's designed now, it's the stars and the stuff you see underwater, and it's just part of the tile set. So it's not drawn on the screen, it's just part of the tile set. So I would have to make some changes. I'm not sure if I can still fit it in, to be honest. Yeah.
I must say, I noticed as well the bubbles in the waters.
Yeah.
They're so cool because they just add that extra dimension. It really brings.
Yeah.
One here from Spicy Knickknacks is saying he's found that very interesting, especially the tools that you're using. So I think, yeah, I don't know how much details there are about using Xamizer. I mean, Xamizer, I think you said that's bit shifters, isn't it?
No, it's not bit shifters, but I'm using a version created by or modified by bit shifters. But it's actually I think it's open source if I'm correct. You can just
I've used it and it's
yeah, you can find it. Yeah.
This version, haven't you? I think that's on their website, isn't it? And it's on their Git as well, the original one. Yeah. So I think sorry, he was asking about the other thing. So I think TileEd, that's an open source thing, isn't it?
The tile editor, yeah, I think so. And I think so.
I think I paid for it. I think you can donate. I think I donated to that, but I don't think you have to donate, do you?
No, I think I bought. No, I'm sure I bought the sprite editor, but I think you can just download the tile editor. Yeah, and they're great tools, but you have to get used to them, of course, like many tools.
Yeah, especially TileEd. There's lots in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
So Colin Hode's asking, are you ever tempted to try developing a game using the old school methods like graph paper and sprite editors written for the Electron?
Let's be really old school. I remember doing that in school. Just we have a boring class and just create some VDU 23 sprites in trying to create a game in BBC Basic. But it's fun, but it's not something I would do now. No, I would just use the modern tools because it makes so much easier to have everything reassembled and test something new and make much more progress like that. Yeah.
And then we've got one from Keys here saying, great games, nice job. Are you planning to make a general game engine to create games like Elementum or Electrobots?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, like AGD or NPAGD. Yeah. Actually, I'm halfway developing. It is a custom programming language and a compiler. But then I switched to making games. But I'm still in the back of my mind thinking I want to make my own kind of game programming language and my own compiler that I can use on the BBC and Electron to create games much quicker. Yeah, like BBC Basic, but then compiled my own language, basically. But it's going to be a while. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, it's just like NPAGD. I mean, I used that a bit, and I think that is sort of closed source, some of the stuff on it. It'd be really cool to get some of your stuff in like an open source thing. But it's a lot of work, isn't it? So I'm still waiting for more questions to come through. I had some questions. The memory, so you've exorcised lots of sprites, tiles, graphics, and all that sort of stuff in Electrobots and the code overlays. Do you know how if it was all uncompressed, you know how big the whole thing is?
Yeah, I should make some calculation, but I'm pretty sure if you look at the room data alone, I know if it's uncompressed, it will be about 16 kilobytes. That's 128 rooms, 120 tiles per room, and some enemy data and other stuff. If you leave that uncompressed, it will be 16 kilobytes, so you don't have space for anything else. And if you compress it, it will be down to 5 or 6 kilobytes. And I'm not sure about the compression ratio for the sprites stuff, but I'm thinking I wouldn't be far off that the game would be twice as big if I didn't compress anything, so it wouldn't fit at all. Yeah.
And on that, do you know, sort of like, I'm guessing the sprites you're saying they're compressed, but you have them uncompressed while the game's playing. Do you have different sprite sets or so for different?
That's a good question. still looking for a way to compress the main sprites, so the player, the enemies, the platforms, the bullets. They are uncompressed actually because I want to draw them as quick as possible. I don't have time to decompress them on the fly while drawing. At least I don't have a way yet. All the other stuff, except this stuff, is compressed. This stuff is uncompressed actually.
Yes.
And, yeah.
So you have. I'm guessing on some screens you don't show all of the sprites all the time. So do you leave the ones that aren't used compressed and then decompressed? Yeah. Or do you leave them all?
That's I've been thinking about it, and it's a really good question, and I decided not to at the moment because you can. How to say? I only have a few enemies. I already had to kill one of the enemy types because it took 512 bytes, which are much too precious to leave in. And I want to be able to mix and match the 3 remaining enemy types in any screen I want. And the bullets could be anywhere. The player is obviously in every screen. So I didn't see much of an advantage to compress and decompress at the moment, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
And sorry, there's no more questions coming through yet. I'll probably throw it open for people to start coming on video because I think you get a few more. I've got one here. I was coming up against some of the problems I mean, it's developing ROMs, but it's a similar thing. You're talking about branches and jumps. You know, you can save a couple of bytes and a couple of cycles there. Do you use any do you run any sort of profiling over your code to work out, oh, if I move this routine next to this routine, I could save a byte in a JSR or a jump? Do you use any tools like that?
Actually, not. I'm thinking, not really. I do. Not. There's 2 things. Just the time components. I use the debug view with the colored raster bars that I showed you in the demo. That's just to show, okay, how much time does some main components of the game, like drawing, key scanning, game logic, statistics, how much time does it take? I don't have to have exact number of cycles for that, but I want to know, does it fit in one frame? And the other one is space. And you know, I've grown so accustomed to watching, looking at my screen at 6502 code. It's just me. I'm profiling my own code, scanning my sources again and again and again. And sometimes scanning the listing from BPASM, because that can give you a fresh perspective, like, hey, this code, I recognize that from somewhere else, yeah? So I'm not using any tools for that, but I'm my own tool, I think, yeah.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah. No, I was just looking at something like ADFS ROM the other day. I noticed if you move one routine up above the other one, you could save, they'd already tried to save it with JSRs and branches instead of jumps.
Right, yeah.
Put the 2 round, you just save 2 bytes. It's like, woo!
Yay! Yeah.
So Keys is asking another one. He's saying, is moving enemies screen related or map related? Which I'm not quite sure I understand.
Not sure what.
No, do you understand that?
No, I don't.
Oh, can the enemies follow you to another room?
Ah, I see. Actually, no, they cannot, because, and why is that? Because it will be more difficult. That's one reason, and they will be moving between screen halves. Sorry, and my whole anti-sprite flicker approach hinges on those 2 screen halves, and the enemies, they have pre-designed patterns. They cannot move around other screens. They cannot leave their own screen half, and that's something that I want to change in another game. I want to enhance my sprite flicker-free system to have it more versatile and have these things that Case is talking about.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Was about that interleaving in the sprites.
Yeah.
So how many can you fit in each half? Is it just you can move one in one half?
Actually, it is virtually unlimited, but you're paying a price in update speed. Yeah, so you're the worst case scenario is, okay, you have to draw and erase the player, and you have to draw and erase one enemy in each screen have. So that's 3 sprites on screen every single frame. Yeah. And if you add more enemies, and I've kept it at 5 per screen have, so you can have 10 enemies, a couple of bullets, and a player, and some objects and other stuff. But you can make it more, but it will be, it will not reduce the speed of the player, but the enemies will be slower in total. So that's a design decision. I want to have maybe 2 or 3 maximum enemies in each screen half, so you can still move around quickly enough. And the player will still be at 50 frames per second. That's not a problem.
Yeah. So you interleave by time as well.
Yeah, it's interleaved. Yeah. And
so another question on that is you had the game logic in the bar sort of in the middle of the screen. Does that does that move to the other one when the player moves?
Yeah. The game logic, that's the trick I learned gradually. It's how do you say that? It's tempting to do everything during VSync, but you will soon learn that that time is really short, especially on the Electron. So you have to figure things out. I want to do things during the screen, and that's where the 2 screen halves come in. And also you have to separate the functions like drawing and erasing, updating the position, scanning for keys, scanning for collisions, updating bullets, whatever else you want to do. If you can separate it and put all that stuff in the other time slot, please do, because that's where many cycles are left. Yeah? So that's what I'm doing. Cool.
So yeah, still not getting any more questions. So I'm going to ask you another one. What do you know what your main inspirations were for sort of the gameplay? Because the Elementum gameplay is quite novel to me. I don't know. I mean, it's sort of a platformer, but it feels different in most games.
Yeah, I hope it does. There is definitely inspiration from what is that game called on the PS4? Meat Boy, Super Meat Boy, and some elements of modern gameplay like Coyote Time. If you know what that means, it means if you're starting to fall off a platform, you can still jump. And so it's not unforgiving; it's quite forgiving. You can see that if you do a turbo and you jump a little bit too late, you can still make the jump. So that's pretty cool. I think games like Chucky Egg, I don't know, and of course Electrobots. I'm thinking about large open worlds like Exile, Citadel, games by Tony Ogden like Camelot and Quest, etc. Yeah, I'm so amazed by their technical novelty, especially in the 80s. I'm not trying to copy that, but I'm trying to inspire myself with those games. Yeah.
Cool. And Colin Hode is saying you're very generous to make these fantastic games available for free. Have you ever considered selling them via stream or accepting donations?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because I'm thinking about that at the moment. I know I'm never going to get rich or famous. I should be active in the 80s. But it would be cool if I have 3 things. The game will always be free to download. But it would be cool if I can have an optional donation, like some other software. And of course, you can always buy a physical copy through Retro Power, Arcadian. And those are probably the 3 flavors that I want to aim for with Electrobots. Yeah, that's I'm thinking about it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, or I just put it out there for free. And if you want to have a physical copy, you can buy that from Retro Power. Like Elementum. Elementum is like that, but I'm thinking, could I add something else for Electrobots? I'm not sure yet.
I've got another one here from Ed. He's saying he thinks the dive under the platform bit's quite novel. So I think what he means there is like even on the first screen of Elementum, to get that, the one sort of near the bottom on the right of the screen, you have to go underneath the platform to get it.
Yeah, Yeah.
Where did you come up with that idea from? Because it took me, I have to say, that first level, it took me about 3/4 of an hour to complete it, and then once I worked out you could do that, it was like, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's excellent to hear that from players, because you can have an intention with the game, but if it works, it's even better, of course. I don't know. I have to be honest. Usually, my games or demos start with a technical challenge. What if I can do this on the Electron? And I start programming, and okay, I've got this ball rolling, or I've got this robot moving around, and it kind of grows from there. And I have some, okay, I want to have some platforms. I want to have a cool jump mechanism. And then you think, okay, I'm starting to design levels. What devious or cool things can I do with these elements, these Lego blocks, if you will? And it just grows from there. Yeah. It's not really one big master plan. It just grows while developing. And actually, just like Kieran just did, it happens on Twitter. It happens on Stardot. I pick up many recommendations, many tips and ideas from other people, and I try to incorporate them if I think it fits with the whole game, and it grows organically like that.
Well, I think also I have to say you're saying it grows organically, but you finished the game, which is amazing. Just,
yeah.
Whenever I start anything like this, you just feature creep crawls in day one.
Yeah.
Kept them very clean, and I mean they're not simple in that technically they're excellent, but the gameplay is, once you've mastered it, it's fairly simple, but you've got challenging levels. So I think you've done both. Really, you've done well to keep it under control and not throw the kitchen sink at it.
Oh, that's
so Colin Ho,
thanks.
Colin Ho saying he'd be happy to make a Electrobots. I think we're all wanting Electrobots to come out. It looks awesome. That.
Thanks.
And the first level's easy, but as you get further on, the dive's crazy hard. It certainly is. He said it's taken a long time to master it. If he's mastered it, he's a better man than me, because I've not mastered it.
I'm sure a couple of beeps or electrons were damaged by playing these games out of frustration. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have to say that the star key stopped working on my Electron. I am blaming you for that.
See, there we go. I'm sorry, mate. Yeah.
Because that's what I've mapped as the jump key on when I'm playing it.
Yeah.
Right, cool. I think I'm probably not going to get any more messages now, so I think what I'll do is, if Dave's happy with it, Ed's saying he got stuck on a level for a very long time, and he was watching other people's scores rise on the high score challenge, and he's saying the high score challenge format does force you to learn games, and I think he's right. I tend to lose my temper with games, but being forced to play against other people, it's quite a good thing. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing the Electrobots one on the high score challenge that we can all join in, because it is really going to be excellent. Right, I'm going to unspotlight you now if I can work out to do it, and then I don't know how to unspotlight you. I'm going to try and unspotlight you.
I've just done that already, Dominic.
Oh, you've just done it, excellent. So I don't know if anybody else wants to pile in with questions.
There were some naughty words during this game, and had my arm been long enough, certainly you would have had a brick through the window, especially early on.
I know you wanted to, yeah. Sorry about it.
That's okay. It was a marvelous learning process, and once a person starts to get a little bit of the hang of this game, the brilliance of it just shines. It's a beautiful game. Really nice.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? We always get these awkward silences, and then everybody piles in at the last minute. Oh, so if nobody else can ask me, I've got on a sort of final one. The bars for the debugging, putting the color bars on. Where did you get that idea from? Was that just something that came to you? Because
No. I've seen that before. I think I'm not sure. Like I follow a lot of game developers on Twitter, and I think it's quite a standard trick for Spectrum programmers, Commodore programmers. I'm pretty sure I saw perhaps Kieran or Simon or anybody else using that. It's not my idea, but I think it's really cool to see what's going on and how much time something takes. So I'm using that since then. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, no, that's a good point. Actually, I think I remember doing that back in the day on the Spectrum, because you could do the border.
Yeah. I think you're right, Dominic. I'm most proud of actually finishing something, and of course, it's really cool. People playing the game, people buying the game, Dave creating a box and a poster and everything. I'm living the 80s dream, but I'm most proud of actually finishing something that I started, because that's difficult for most people, including me. And of course, you get to the point where you have to add a high score table, a password system, an introduction screen, a final screen, a game over screen. That's all a bit tedious. The fun is in the core game. But if you want to finish it, you have to write all the other stuff also. And that's, yeah.
Yeah, and then, like you said, the testing as well.
And testing, of course, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if people can see me. I'm just going to hold up. Again, you can get this from the Retro software site. I got one now. I'd say it's beautifully produced in a vinyl disc pack.
Definitely, yeah.
With a nice poster there. Yeah. So it's
all thanks to Dave. Yeah, certainly.
So that was really, really, really excellent talk. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Now I'm going to ask everybody. This is the bit that I'm most scared about. Is I'm going to ask everybody to give you a round of applause. So can everybody unmute? Turn their video on.
Awesome.
Thank you.